least 3,500 people have now left eastern Aleppo after the evacuation operation restarted. The civilians have been taken to an opposition-controlled area to the west of the city. Aid organisations have set up an emergency camp to provide food, clothing and medical help. Well, 10 buses that left the Shia town of Fua and Kafraya with roughly 500 people on board have now arrived in Aleppo. The evacuations from the pro-regime towns are in exchange for those from Aleppo. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to a Syrian activist who's still inside the east of the city. But first, our correspondent at TRT World's Ediz Tianshan, who's to the west of the city. Ediz, hello again to you. Just explain to us exactly where you are right now and what's taking place.
Kamali, we're at that same transfer point in western Aleppo. This is the first arrival point for those civilians who are taken out of the besieged eastern Aleppo through a convoy of buses, and they are driven through a hostile area, as they refer to it, the regime-controlled western part of the city, and right after that they are brought to this area. What used to be a car park is now being used for as a transfer point. And let me just show you, because just 10 minutes or so ago, we have seen another convoy that just arrived in this area. I can count a total of 12 buses. They told us that roughly 100 people can fill up each of these buses, so we expect more than 1,000 civilians that have just arrived in this area. And right here in this truck, as you can see, that belongs to the IHH, one of the largest humanitarian aid organizations in Turkey that has a large presence here on the ground as well. All of those people who have just arrived, they are rushing to one of these trucks because, remember, they have been under a siege by Syrian regime for the last 6 months or so. So they have been deprived of basic necessities. So right there you see them being handed boxes of food. I was just down there. It is mostly fruits, juices and canned goods. And there are some other vans out there in the larger area that are also handing out winter clothes and blankets. There are others where they can get water. They're really here, first of all, trying to satisfy their immediate basic necessities. To remind you, there are also relief workers that are specifically medical workers, rather. They are also attending those wounded or sick right here on this ground. So it does look quite a bit chaotic. So really, there's no organization whatsoever who is parking where, who's located where. You see a combination of people, as well as civilians who have just arrived. You also see their relatives. There were also some dramatic moments that I witnessed earlier. We've seen families getting together, finally finding each other after months, some of them after years of not seeing each other, because simply this civil war has dragged them in different directions. You also have rebels who are now controlling this area. They're trying to make sure there is security as part of the ceasefire deal. This used to be a front line, because we have the regime forces literally just behind those set of trees. Some they say 300 to 500 meters away are the regime positions, but there is a ceasefire now. They say the area is controlled, and really what we're seeing is a very significant moment in this civil war. Eastern Aleppo has been under siege, as I've said, for 6 months, and that was one of the key points of fighting. But after rebels lost that area, civilians had been trapped in an ever-shrinking area that was still under bombardment. And we've also spoken to some of the families. I want to briefly tell you about the family that I've spoken to. The head of the family, Fevzi, said that there were 5 extended families traveling, living together, and they had gone through some real hardships. They had absolutely nothing left. They lost their 6-story building house in eastern Aleppo. That was before they had to flee to the remaining area called Sukaria, and there they had absolutely nothing, no more belongings. When they arrived here, I've seen them in little plastic bags. They were carrying the mere necessities they have, but other than that, they had a few clothing items on them and some blankets, and that's all. And I've spoken to also their 11-year-old son, Mohammed, who said he said the Aleppo was unbearable to live in. He couldn't go out to play at all. every day he was stuck inside, trapped in some area. They were constantly trying to protect themselves from the ongoing bombardment. I mean, he looked slightly traumatized, but as the child that he is, he still said he wants to go back to school, he wants to see his friends, and I asked him where he wants to go next, and he has no idea. And to be honest, even the family itself, that specific family, is still waiting in a corner out there. They told us they don't know where to go. I mean, some of these people are now going to live with their relatives in Idlib province or the larger Aleppo province. Some of them are assigned to one of the pre-existing refugee camps, but some have no clue, and they are waiting for one of these humanitarian workers to approach them, and so that they can register them in one of these places. And for those who have no other place to go, there are now new refugee camps being built in different areas in the Idlib province. And for others that have no other option, going into Turkey might also be an option, as we've heard from Turkish officials.
And Eddie's, those people that you've been able to speak to who have told you that they plan to go to Idlib, are they concerned that Idlib could be the next target for the regime to try and oust whatever rebel fighters end up there?
Well, Kamali, no doubt every single person I've spoken to said anywhere else is better than Eastern Aleppo. They really find it difficult to put it into words to describe what it was like in Eastern Aleppo. It was an absolute destitute. They did not have enough food there. They were scrambling for food. They had to often economize what they had because they were not sure how much longer that siege was going to be. Another lady that I've just spoken to down there, she said, we didn't even have water. What else can I tell you? So they literally didn't have anything. They also, electricity didn't exist, no medical supplies. Nobody could even be sick and receive treatment. And that's why they now talk about Idlib province as a safe haven. And what I've seen in the Idlib province for the past few days, it is relatively calm because of the ceasefire. But when you go around Idlib province, you also see rundown buildings. Some of them are collapsed clearly by airstrikes. We've seen also hospitals and schools that were targeted in the Idlib province. Large marketplaces were also targeted in Idlib province. So even though there's relative calm there and there are more reserved refugee camps sort of further away from the fighting ground, from the front lines, they still feel a relative sense of safety and security because they are at least further away from the front lines. But as we've seen repeatedly in this ongoing civil wars, and as we're seeing now with Aleppo and Idlib, front lines keep changing. So even though conditions will be better for these people, at least they'll be able to have access to humanitarian aid regularly, at least through Turkey. But the war has not ended, and the suffering has not ended either. If we see front lines changing again, these people might very well be targeted by the Syrian regime and Russia again.
Absolutely. Okay, Eddie's, for now, just west of Aleppo city. Thank you.